Hello, this video is to describe the step-by-step process in configuring Palo Alto VM Series Firewall on Microsoft Cloud. The goal is that we have two separate private networks and then we want to protect the traffic flow using a firewall. So this is a little diagram that I have here. So we have the web server private virtual network. Then we have the database virtual network that is also a private network. Then we have our firewall here. So the goal is that we want traffic going to the database from the web server to go through the firewall before it gets here. So just the source is going to be from the web server IP. That is, we have a workload, a VM, an IIS site running here will go through the firewall before it gets to a VM on the database virtual network, and then vice versa. Please give a thumbs up if you find this video useful. Alright, let's begin. Microsoft has made it easy to set up Palo Alto Firewall through the portal. So since we are at the portal right now, we can quickly go to the search bar, type in Palo Alto, and then click on the VM Series Next Generation Firewall. If you click on that, then choose your plan that you want to go with. So let's just click on this one, and then it takes you through the basic resource group, username, and all that fun stuff. Then networking is where it creates for you the management subnet, the untrust, and the trust subnet, right? So we have already created all those stuff pretty much down here. And one thing that you also have to take note is that there needs to be peering between the virtual network. So there needs to be peering between the firewall and the web server and the firewall and the database, but there shouldn't be any transfer between the web server and the database, which will deviate the goal of trying to go through the firewall, right? So it only needs to be between the firewall and the web server and the firewall and the database, just like we have here in the diagram. All right, so what we're going to be focusing now is to create stuff on the Palo Alto or configure the firewall on the Palo Alto side. And to do that, we are going to go through these few steps, which is creating the objects. Something I like to do to make things easier: network interface, virtual router, static route, security rules, and UDR, that is the user defined routes. And one way to get to the interface of the firewall is to come to the VM of the firewall and copy the DNS name. But make sure that you have the HTTPS in front : / else it might not route properly. So to begin that, we can go ahead and start creating the objects. So let's create the object for our trust interface. So trusts, and mostly I like to add the IP address, which is 10.1.2.4 here. So 10.1.2.4/24, which is our trust interface. And we can get that from, if we come here and come to the subnet, this is our trust. And then going back, let's create the object for the untrust, which is 10.1.1.4/24. So we can copy. So let's do the 10.1.1.4/24 and take this one out. And then we can create a different object for our web virtual network. So web subnet will be 10.0.0.0/27 and 10.0.0.0, which can also be found here if we come to our web interface. And the subnet, this is the subnet for the web. Then let's create the last one, which is for the database. So let's do DB for short, 10.3.0.0, then 3.0.0/27. And that can also be found here on the Azure side, 10.3.0.0/27. All right, so let's go ahead and commit our changes right now. All right, change was committed successfully, so we can see that all our changes here have been committed successfully. So the next thing that we can go ahead and do is to create our network interface, right? So we have the ETH11, ETH12, right? And then to map that out to the Azure side, we can come here to the Firewall virtual network and go into the connected devices. We can see that the ETH1 is connected to the on-trust interface, and the ETH2 is connected to the trust interface. So going by that, let's set exactly the same thing on this side. So click on the ETH1 and then the interface type, select layer 3. It opens a dialog and then you have to add. So since you created the objects for all the IP addresses, it is populating here for you to select what you need to put there. So right now we want to create an interface for the on-trust, which is the on-trust 10.1.1.4. We select that here and then we click OK. You can put in comments or anything that you want, and if we select the Ethernet 1.2/2, we have, and then select the trust interface for that. So we can put in here as trust, and then also put here as on trust. And once that is done, we can commit our changes. So it is basically telling us that we do not have zone configuration set up, we do not have virtual router configured, we do not have the interface on 2, we have no zone also, and then the interface 2, we do not have any virtual router configured, but we are going to go to that. We are going to work on getting all that set up. So if we go back to our diagram, this is what we have. We have to be working on creating the objects, the network interface, the virtual router, and the static route. So we can go back here and we see that changes have been committed successfully and everything is green, right? So on the same page, we can go to the zones and then create our zones. So one, create add, let's just do trust, and then trust is is layer 3, and then add an interface, which is the /1.2, and then add our on trust interface, which is the on trust, and then layer 3, add, and then go OK. So now we have the zone set up. Let's go ahead and create our zones. We can just go ahead and dive in and create our virtual router and static routes. So to start, we can just add one here and then VR for virtual router tests, and then add both our 2 interfaces to that virtual router. Okay, and go back into the VR and then create our static routes. So since this is a very small networking, we're just going to do our static routes, put them in manually. So web route is going to be web route. So we want to get to, if you want to get to the web route, you go through, this is the destination, and the interface is going to be on the trusts, and the IP address, the next hop, is going to be the gateway of the trust interface. So that is 10.1.2.1. So that should be a static route for the web virtual network. So the DB route is going to be similar to that. So to go to the DB, that is 10 here. Then the IP address, the interface is going to be on the Ethernet 2. The next hop is going to be 10.1.2.1. That is the gateway of the trust IP address, of the trust subnet. And let's add one to it, which is going to be our internet route. It's going to be 0.0.0/0. And then that will be the gateway of our own trust, which is 10.1.1. So do that. And then let's commit our changes. So now, if we go back to our board for our changes to commit, let's come back to Azure on the database side. We can see that the database VM that we have here is on its own private network, which is the database virtual network. If we go in here, we can see that that was the subnet that we had set up on Palo Alto side 10.3.0. So that is where the database is. Then the web server is on its own separate VNet, just as we did on the Palo Alto side is 10.0.0/27. So what we can do right now is quickly run a test just to see if we can hit the database from the web server. So test net connection, do a computer name, which is going to be 10.3.0.4 on port 1433, right, which is the IP. So the IP address of this virtual machine, the private IP, is 10.3.0.4. So this is what we're trying to see if we can get to it. And we can see here that our rules are in the web to DB and the DB to web. All the rules have set in. We're trying to see if we can get to it from the web server. And from here, we have the created the object and the network ID, interface, the virtual router, the static route, security rules, and I think what is left is the UDR. But we're just going to run this test. So this is what we got from trying to get to the database from the web server. So TCP test succeeded, it's equal to false, and it timed out, right? And this is what we expect. We expect to get this result, and that is because the VM is in its own private network and doesn't know how to get to the database. So what we need to do is to put is to add a route table. So if we come here, we've already gone ahead and set up the route table here. So this is the route, which we have the firewall route. So the IP address and then the destination is, you know, all IPs in this range, and then the next hop is going to be the virtual appliance. So the firewall is considered as a virtual appliance, and then the next hop address is the IP address of the trust interface. So that is the trust. So if we come here to the virtual network and then go to connected devices, that is the IP address of the trust interface. So that is going to be your next hop address for your DB, for your route table. So let's go ahead and associate the route table to the subnet and then do a quick another test. So we have associated that to the database subnet. Let's do that for the web subnet as well. Okay, So once that is done, right now we're just going to run another test to see if right now the VM will be able to find a way to the web to the database VM, so on port 1433. So let's run that and wait for the response. Yep. So our results came back, and then so from here we can see that from the source to the destination, which is the source address is the web server, the 10.0.04, and then it was able to reach 10.3.0.4 on port 14333. So we have a successful connection. That means the web server was able to find that through the firewall. So let's confirm that on the firewall side. So let's go to monitor, right? And then in here, let's put in our IP address as the source, and let's see where it is going to. Okay, so let's put here the source, and then destination is 10.314. Then let's do that. So right here, we are able to see that the trust from both trust and trust, that is the IP address of the web server, is able to get to the IP of the VM on the database side. And this is the rule that was able to cache that. So this is the rule, one of the rules that we set. So if we come to the policies, we do have a rule here, the web to DB, and then we can see that it has got a 2-hit count. Right, so first was the ping, and the other one was the port 1433. So let's do another test. So right now we're gonna do that from the database side. So test connection, computer name is gonna be 10.0.0.4 on port that. So you see that the remote is the 10 which is a web server, and then we're able to reach it on port 443. So let's go back to our monitor and then see the log. So first let's see our policy, whether we were able to get a hit on this one. So you see that we've got a hit on the database web server. We've got a 1 hit, and then if we see the monitor and see the logs, let's clear this guy. And then you can see that from our database we were able to reach, and this is the rule that was hit as DB to web. So all right, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.